What are some psychology experiments with interesting results? White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white and black rats are raised together and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically rats are racist, unless raised to accept differences. I'm late but nobody has said it yet. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead they told the teachers that a few students, picked at random, were very brilliant and scores very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study the kids took the test again, and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scores higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start, didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of application in the world and especially education. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, this experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. On this experiment, they took groups of orphan children and separated them into 3 groups. One was the control, the second were told they has a lips and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, Group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They talked better. They were more willing to improve. They were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. Not entirely sure it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan experiment. 13 people feigned mental illnesses to get into mental hospitals and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan in fact hadn't sent anyone. The 3 Christs of Ypsilanti psychologist forces 3 people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where 2 women who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured, 3 Christs. What would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy. That they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures. Some unethical stuff. Interesting though. I'm a huge fan of Milgram's small world experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it is really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it onto the same group of people on the 5th degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive, on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. Wow, how awesome that Milgram is famous for more than one experiment. And speaking of the internet, this is actually how packets on the internet are sent, TCP/IP. When you look up a website, the protocol doesn't know exactly how to get there. It just asks nearby computers to get you closer until you reach the website. Amazing how fast websites load considering this imperfect medium. I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We are not born with it, but if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood end and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who were standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, baby crawls over there without giving a shit. At some point though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty ducking cool. The most fascinating part about these experiments was, for me, this fear of heights depends on the way infants move and has to be relearned once they switch from crawling to walking. More precisely, very young infants crawl over the edge, then learn to avoid it. Later, when they learned how to walk, they again walk over the edge, seemingly forgetting their fear of heights. Finally, they relearn it and avoid the edge while walking. 2. Reconsolidation. When you retrieve memory from your long-term memory, it is susceptible to being manipulated. This can lead to memories being totally changed from the source. This is why eyewitness accounts cannot be fully seen as true. This knowledge is also being used to help people with PTSD by changing the negative memories they have of their particular trauma. It's not that psychopaths lack empathy, but rather, they have the manual settings. A specific region of the brain lights up when people experience empathy. For most people it's an automatic, subconscious response. But in a study where they showed emotional videos to psychopaths and none, while scanning their brains, psychopaths would only light that region of the brain when specifically asked to feel for the character, while the control participants would light up automatically. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with 2 other people and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that, because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. I've done this to younger siblings and relatives that won't shut up about wanting to drink shots. We just rub a bit of alcohol around the rim of the shot glass and fill it with water. 3 deep and Theo starts snoozing on the sofa within the hour. The chocolate martinis I make for my auntie who gets too tipsy too easily are basically chocolate milk with a splash of chocolate liquor. Like, the kids could probably drink them and be fine to drive home. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals. I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they choose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer as to not be judged by others or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting, since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even questioned their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time some of the actors say the wrong answer, while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support. Edit. Conformity in participants might be caused by either being afraid others' judgment or due to self-doubt. Aaron and Dutton, 1974. Misattribution of arousal. Men who had just walked across bridge, either steady or unsteady, were approached by a female psychology student, posing to do a project on the effects of exposure to scenic attractions on creative expression. The men had to complete a questionnaire and write a short dramatic story about a picture she provided, and she gave them her phone number if they had more questions. Men who walked across the shaky bridge were more likely to call her up because they misattributed the arousal from the bridge to the woman. TLDR, watch a horror movie on the first date. Edit, grammar. Sorry about the confusion. Not a psychologist, but the one where given a choice between sitting down doing nothing and shocking oneself, people tend to choose the shock. Ergo, we would choose pain over boredom. I don't know the name of it, but apparently two people become closer if they survive through something together. Not even actual surviving death scenarios, but anything that has you on your toes and heart racing, like a roller coaster. If you train a rat to press a lever for cocaine, and then put it in a box with only that lever, it will press that lever as much as you'll allow it. The rat will stop eating and drinking and just do cocaine. If you train a rat to press a lever for cocaine, and then put it in an enriched environment, egg, other rats to play with, toys, place to explore, where it could still press the lever for cocaine. It may press the lever occasionally but not as frequently as its counterpart in the dull environment. These findings were a big deal in the behaviorism world because they put a lot of previous results into context and help explain the link between poverty and drug use. Edit, wow. I didn't expect this to blow up like this. I'm unmobile and don't have access to a computer right now, so linking sources will be difficult. But a Google search of rat park will pull up plenty of sources. I was wrong about the rats being conditioned using cocaine. It was morphine, but the idea is still the same. Many people have pointed out errors with these experiments, and there are plenty, but that's the beauty of science. It allows for the development of testable hypotheses which can change given the current state of evidence. Also, thank you for the silver kind stranger. Edit 2. This experiment does not prove that bad environments facilitate drug use, or that good environments protect against it. Addiction is immensely complex and this is just a small piece of it. Dunning-Kruger effect is one of my favorites. Basically, people with less expertise in a field will overestimate their abilities in the given field because they don't know enough to see the limits of their expertise. At the same time, experts tend to underestimate their abilities because they know too well what they don't know. The phenomenon has, among other factors, been linked to anti-vaxxers who overestimate their expertise, not seeing what they don't know, with dire consequences. There was an experiment to measure the dopamine, i.e. happiness, hit your brain takes when eating something you're craving. The dopamine builds with the anticipation and peaks right as you take the first bite. Then, after the first moment it's in your mouth, the dopamine levels begin to decrease. This showed that many times we are desiring, edited to show the distinction made by poster below, the attainment of the thing more than the thing itself. Edit, not to proselytize, but this corresponds somewhat to the Buddhist principle of unsatisfactory desire. It's very interesting. If people have the upper hand they will put others down to keep it. An experiment told a class of kids that having blue eyes meant you were smarter, achieved more, etc. All of a sudden kids with blue eyes formed their own groups. Things like bullying and exclusion of other eye colors started too. They repeated the experiment with different eye colors in different classes, all with the same results. The more interesting / terrifying thing was that halfway through, they swapped the experiment and told all of the kids that having brown eyes meant you were smarter. The flip in beliefs was immediate, as was the bullying. They tried the experiment again, giving the kids green or yellow colors. Thus the difference was not even inherent. Bullying and exclusion began. Flip the superior and inferior group. The behavior inverted. Possibly the worst part was when the children started believing that they were in fact dumber for having brown eyes or a green collar. They began to internalize the belief, and they did so quickly. Split brain studies. One example, by providing differing information to each hemisphere of the brain in split brain individuals, those with a severed corpus callosum, meaning there's no communication between the two hemispheres, they found that people would actually physically grab their own hand with their other hand if they saw it making a mistake. Basically each side of the brain controls one side of your body, and in split brain people you can actually make both sides display a disagreement with the other. Which is insane, if you think about it. Disappointed this isn't in the top comments. Will probably get buried. Michael of Source fame teamed up with a group of PhD candidates in the psychology department of McGill for his show Mindfield. They recruited 3 kids with different disorders: eczema with skin picking disorder, ADHD, and chronic migraines after a concussion. The kids were each told they were going to be the first to receive a new experimental treatment for their condition, which consisted of putting them into a fake, non-functional MRI machine. Before doing so, they told them that the machine had the power to help them heal their brain. Michael even got a bunch of famous YouTubers to make fake videos discussing the new technology to make the kids believe it while they were in the machine. The researchers, dressed as doctors, asked the kids if they were feeling the effects of the machine and that they believed it was working. They never lied to the kids. They just told them it would give them the power to heal themselves. All 3 of the kids had markedly improved symptoms several weeks later. The girl with eczema pretty much entirely stopped picking her skin to the point that she felt comfortable wearing short sleeve shirts for the first time. The mother of the kid with ADHD reported that he was much more calm and not as hyperactive. The kid with chronic migraines went from having something like 5 to 10 debilitating migraines per day to absolute 0. As shown by the chart his mom kept to track them. Placebos are a hell of a drug. Not quite psychology, but it very cool. Normally, if you try to mix blue light with yellow light, red and green, it turns out as white light. A scientist conducted an experiment where they would shine blue light in one eye of someone and yellow light in the other. The majority said that they just saw the light separately, but some said that they saw a new color that they couldn't even describe. This also works with cyan and red, and magenta and green. Hubel and Wiesel inserted an electrode into the brain of a cat and took a single cell recording of a cell in its visual cortex. By somewhat of an accident, they found that the neuron only fired when an object had one specific orientation. This was pretty much the discovery of center/surround-on/off visual processing cells in the V1 visual cortex. Cool stuff. Hedonic adaptation. Put simply, a person who had just won the lottery and another person who had just been paralyzed took a survey to measure their life contentment. Obviously it was high and low, respectively. However, they both took the same survey a year later and both scored similarly. The point being that regardless what happens to you in life, good or bad, you will always adapt and spend most of your life feeling neutral. Apostrophe. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.